one of my favorite Springsteen lines comes from Long Walk Home. That flag standing over the courthouse means certain things are set in stone, who we are, what we'll do, and what we won't. And I think about that all the time when I'm covering stories that involve that intersection of sports patriotism and the militarization of sports more than anything else. And I actually referenced that line on air recently when I was doing a long form commentary piece about some of that stuff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is my new friend I met via Twitter. He is Spectrum Sports 360 host and reporter, Jon Alba. Jon, welcome to the show.
Well, Jesse, I'll tell you, I really appreciate it, man. I normally, when I do radio hits or podcast hits, it's about sports, but anytime I can talk the Bruce book, the book of Bruce, whatever you want to call it, I'm in a good mood. I've literally got the big all songs Springsteen textbook right by me right now. I had to do some research and preparation for this conversation, so I'm very excited.
That is so cool. Yeah, I do. Every once in a while, sports and Springsteen's collide, and it was funny. In 2016, my only time I've seen him in Jersey, I was there at the Met, for one of those three epic. I was there on the second night, and the next morning, Stan Goldstein's, had that. He did a tour for us, and as we're driving, he says, "Okay, the only person in the car that will care, Jesse, that is Jason Garrett's parents' house."
Oh, there you go. There you go.
I went, "Oh, nice!" And so I joked. I supported Jason Garrett as the coach of the Cowboys a lot longer than I should have because he's a huge Springsteen fan.
Yeah.
I really wanted him to do well.
Yeah, now he's offensive coordinator for the Giants, and he's living those wrecking ball dreams there in the swamps of Jersey. So
absolutely. So tell us a little about yourself before we get into your. I want to talk about your growing up, but just give us your elevator pitch.
Sure. Yeah. Well, currently I'm a sports reporter and host for, as you said, Spectrum Sports 360, which is a half-hour Sports Center style show here in the Orlando and Tampa area. But originally I am from New Jersey and grew up in the Church of Springsteen. And it's funny, when I'm not hosting the show, I'm doing long-form human interest stories that are sports related, but at their core, they're about individuals who have overcome adversity, people who are doing really unique things. And Springsteen's storytelling methods and his songs have had such a gigantic influence on my personal storytelling. So those are all things that I really think about in terms of channeling human emotion when I'm covering stories and covering people. So even in that crossover, it's a weird crossover, but it's something that has resonated with me. So I've been here for about 3 years or so in the Orlando area, and prior to that, I did a few years in Bangor, Maine, and went to school in Connecticut over at Quinnipiac University. So I'm a Northeaster at my heart, and Bruce Springsteen kind of followed me throughout my entire life here.
How are you doing with the pandemic there in Florida?
Well, the pandemic doesn't exist in Florida. I don't know if you've seen that, but
I'm in Texas, so
yeah.
I have the same feeling.
It's wild here, man. It's it all boils down to personal responsibility, and if some people want to take personal responsibility, then it's great. If people don't, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. And I quite literally talk to people for a living. So I'm out in the field all the time, and you get people who get it and you get people who don't. And all I can do is try to be safe and hope that my family stays safe up in New Jersey, which it seems so far they've been able to, and vaccines are on the way. So that's good. And Yeah, man, just trying to get by. I hope you're trying to do the same.
Yeah, I've shared this on the podcast, but starting at the about the middle of May last year, I went back into the office. We're considered essential services. We do roadside assistance, mostly for the RV industry. And so since May, in a lot of ways, life has been normal for me. I get in the car, I drive to the office. We wear a mask if we're not at our desk.
Right.
They take our temperature every morning when we walk in, and answer, a few simple questions. And then, I drive home. The big difference is, no live music, no live sports. Very rare, when they started opening restaurants in the fall, we've done a couple, and it's neat because the restaurants are very limited. And of course, now then the governor has said 100%, and you don't need to wear a mask unless you want to. And
Welcome to my world, brother.
yes, and my son and I, who's a huge sports guy, we're talking about, yes, we want to go to the new Ranger Stadium. We
Yeah.
want to see that park, but at the same time, well, let's
Yeah.
get a few more, vaccines in there before that happens.
No, I understand that entirely. Yeah, you got that whole new ballpark out there, which is
Hmm.
beautiful. It hosted the World Series, and
Yeah,
uh, yeah, that's the man. Listen, I'm out there covering real sports in real time, and it's still awkward being at stadiums. And they have limited capacity at sporting events here in Florida, but even so,
yeah.
seeing limited capacity, it's just so strange.
Were you able to go into the NBA bubble at all since you're close there, or did they keep it totally no reporters?
So they had reporters. I think it was like a $60,000 fee to get into the
Okay, well,
bubble.
yeah,
But I was reporting from the outside of the bubble. Like you'd go up to the Wide World of Sports complex, and there'd be like a roped off area where you couldn't go beyond. So we'd go right up to that, but
okay.
we couldn't go beyond that. But that was a crazy experience in and of itself, and seeing how these leagues have weathered the storms, especially that was all happening in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement and
Yes.
the protests and seeing that convergence was such a surreal experience, but it's one that I'm going to remember for the rest of my career. That's for sure.
And I promise we're going to get to Bruce in a minute. You just complimented me like, hey, I don't normally, I'm excited to not talk sports, but, um, my son and I, he was staying with us at the time, um, because of the pandemic. And, so he's, we both are big Luca fans, and, we're
Mhm.
so excited about watching the Mavericks when it came back on. And, from our perspective, we loved seeing how the NBA, it felt different. It was almost like you were watching a YMCA, or like a sports league, you
Yeah.
know, playing. And then we loved, all the Black Lives Matters and the protests, and how the NBA said, yes, we embrace this. We want you to do this. And the coaches and the staff and everything. And so I really felt like they handled that really well. And so, yes, I was really proud. And, you know, we got we got one great game on with the Mavs in the playoffs, and then they said, "Okay, move along, little one." So we'll see what they do this year. So yeah,
Yeah, the WNBA and the NBA were really at the forefront when it came to social progressiveness and Black Lives Matter and all that stuff. So they certainly drew the attention to themselves in a way that they got their message out. And it's pretty crazy to think the amount of social change, and maybe if not change, but social awareness at least that we've seen
yes,
in the past year or so.
yeah, and I think that is well said. And I go back to, like, when I watched Ken Burns' baseball
Mhm.
documentary about the time of Jackie Robinson, and
Yep.
how baseball at the time was doing that, and then they kind of went back. So it's an interesting, there was a lot of discussion on the local sports station I listened to here, the Ticket, about, the NFL head coaches, and what do you do about that?
Well, I'll tell you what. And aside from that, and I totally agree with you that that itself is a whole issue in and of itself. But um, growing up in school and college, especially. My senior thesis was the intersection of sports, patriotism, and race, which is
Interesting.
basically Kaepernick 101, right? So
Yeah.
and, like we've seen this stuff over so much over the course of the past few years, and I connect this, not trying to like bring things full circle here, but like I connect this to Springsteen in a big way too, because one of my favorite Springsteen lines comes from Long Walk Home. That flag standing over the courthouse means certain things are set in stone, who we are, what we'll do, and what we won't. And I think about that all the time when I'm covering stories that involve that intersection of sports, patriotism, and the militarization of sports more than anything else. And I actually referenced that line on air recently when I was doing a long form commentary piece about some of that stuff. So it's crazy, man. I mean, you can draw all those parallels, all those things come together, and
Well, it's all about Bruce. Let's just face
right.
it.
I mean, life is Bruce. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like all apologies to the great Ted Lasso show, which I adore, right? But not football is life. No, Springsteen is life, right?
That's right.
It just
That's right.
Oh, well, talk to me growing up. You said you grew up in Jersey. Were your family musical? What kind of music did you listen to as a kid?
So my dad used to work in I don't know how many people will remember this, but there used to be a CD store called Coconuts, and back in the day. And so I should preface by saying I grew up in Central Jersey. I grew up about 15 minutes from Freehold, as is. So you know, Springsteen's kind of embedded in the culture there, as is. But my dad managed a music store back in the day before he went into the textile industry, and music's always been such a huge part of his life. And it was never something that he like imparted on me, or my mother imparted on me that like, you're going to be a Springsteen fan, but I was constantly surrounded by it. And like, I remember in my youngest age being, I don't know, I'm 28 right now. So I remember being maybe 2 years old or so. And my dad in his small purple car, and I can like distinctively remember the smell of it, like the touch of it, playing like 57 channels like on loop, because he's like, this is different, this is cool. And I was like, okay. So like my first impressions of Springsteen are like 57 channels of like all songs. So like that's that. I was like, okay. So like for some reason, me as a 2-year-old, that's like such a vivid memory built into my head right now. And yeah, I can remember them going to the reunion tour when they went to one of the shows at the Continental Airlines Arena when he was doing the sold out residency there. Those are like my earliest memories. And then it was just something that I started really picking up on. And I was actually a few blocks from the World Trade Center on 9/11. So I was a kid at the time, and those memories are burnt into my head.
What were you doing in Manhattan?
So my dad worked in the city at the time, and I just happened to be in the city with him on that one specific day because I was going to go to a chiropractor appointment, and then we were going to go to the Yankee game later that night. And it just happened to be September 11th, Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. So I'm close to the World Trade Center. I have those memories just so vividly burnt into my head. So when The Rising came out, it was something that I took to immediately, even as a third or fourth grader, however old I was. And that led to me seeing him in concert for the first time. So I so vividly remember those things. And that's where my first connection to Bruce was really formed.
So, John, it doesn't sound like you went through a rebellion stage where you went, oh, Bruce is my parents' music, I need to find my own.
No, I just kind of had it embedded in me of what I wanted to listen to. And Springsteen was like my first like real deep dive. Like everyone has like those one or two bands, one or two acts that they really just like. For me, 1A is AC/DC, 1B is Springsteen. So like those are my two religions and everything. And,
right.
I'm as passionate about AC/DC as I am Springsteen. And AC/DC I found a little later in life, probably around like high school or so. But Bruce was kind of that first, like, this is your rite of passage.
Yeah.
You're a white kid from New Jersey. Like you need to love Bruce Springsteen. Like that's just how it's going to be. So I was surrounded by that. When I was an infant, my mom told me that she used to sing "Man's Job" to me, but she changed the words to "Loving You's a Mom's Job."
Oh,
So,
how lovely.
I
Yeah.
guess all that stuff is kind of deep down in my brain somewhere.
Yeah. So, one of the questions I usually ask is how you find Bruce and what about him spoke to you. But from you, it was like, where, where did I find oxygen, right? It was just there.
So it's funny. I started playing music around eighth, ninth grade or so, playing guitar. I kind of taught myself how to play. And I linked up with a buddy of mine in high school, and we started playing in the Asbury Park scene a lot. A guy named Bobby Mahoney, and he and I started a band where they're still going tight right now, and I'm very proud of them. But we really made somewhat of a niche name for ourselves in the Asbury Park scene. And as I became more embedded in the Asbury Park scene and playing the Stone Pony and playing the Wonder Bar and playing all these historic Bruce venues, like I really went from being a big Bruce fan to like, okay, this is like religious territory for me at this point.
Sure.
And as I grew as a storyteller and started to pursue my career in journalism, I had always resonated with Bruce's like music and the actual instrumentation of stuff, but that's when I started doing a real big deep dive into the lyrics and the individual things that he had to say in each song and thematic elements that would resonate with different elements of my life. And I'd say it was as I got to that point, that's when I was like, okay, this man has a legitimate effect on me to the point where I went to the Broadway show and I mean, I'm in full blown tears just streaming down my face, walking down Times Square afterwards as my mom's like, you all right, bro? Like, you okay there?
Yeah.
Like, so it really had a very personal effect on me. And then I had some personal interactions with him in the Asbury Park music scene too. So I think all those things kind of really helped me push to that point of fandom.
Well, good. I can't wait to hear those stories. What I think is interesting is, I think I have a similar, I graduated high school in 77, so I'm older than dirt, and so, Discover the River and Hungry Heart and Born in the USA like everyone else, and the live box set and Tunnel of Love. But, but I was kind of like this, like, oh yeah, I like Bruce Springsteen. Yeah, he's good. And then 9/11 happened, and we had that telethon, right?
Mhm.
Afterwards, where it opens with
Yeah.
Bruce and members of the E Street Band singing, My City of Ruin. And I'm just like, this is,
It's euphoric.
I mean, it is. It's like, oh my God, this is perfect. That how could any band know the right song to say at such a time? And then it's funny, you find out later it wasn't even about necessarily 9/11, right? But it's like, that's his universal, he is a Rorschach test that, his music can be mean to different things. And so I got The Rising, and then 2002 was the first time I saw him live, and that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was when
that's,
I first saw him too on the
that's a,
Rising tour.
yeah, like that's all she wrote, as to quote him, right? And that's when I became a casual fan to a passionate fan. And then there was a point where, and this is, you're going to laugh, John, but you mean I can drive to a different city to see Bruce perform? I don't have to sit here in Dallas and wish he
And
would
wait for
perform.
him to come, right?
Right. Like, oh, wait a minute, I can go to Bruce. I didn't know we could do that. And, and so now then my wife was joking with me a couple of weeks ago. She's like, how long has it been since you've seen Bruce live? And I go, it's been, not counting Broadway, 4 years.
Yeah.
You must be like, he's like, yes, yes. I'm like, I am worried we're not going to pay our mortgage when he starts touring again. Cause it's like, okay, we're just going to have to find a way. You mentioned seeing him your first show. I always preface this question, John, with the amount of times you've seen him perform live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. there are people that have never seen him perform live that are massive fans. And there have been fans that were lucky enough to, find him early in the 70s, living there in the Northeast area, and were able to see him tons of times. But for the record, do you count how many times you've seen him?
I have a rough estimate. I'd have to really like go back and think through it. And like, what do you count? Do you count only East Street Band shows? Do you count like I've seen him because I've performed with and I've toured with Joe Grusheki's band a couple times, and like so I've seen Bruce like in that setting. Like does that stuff count? I've seen the Broadway show, so I'd say a rough estimate, probably around 10 or 11 times, I'd say, and that doesn't count the hours and hours on YouTube that I've spent watching every single live gig.
If you want, there is a wonderful website called My Boss Time, and it has every show ever done, and you can select which ones you've attended.
There you go.
It will do the database for you. What's your song you've heard the most? What song you've heard the least? So it's a fun rabbit hole to go
awesome. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna skip to the money shot. Talk to me about playing in the Jersey scene, and how did you guys end up with Joe Grusheky and meeting Bruce? I mean, let's go just straight to, I'm going to forget the appetizers. Let's go straight to the entree.
Let me tell you something, man. These were the best moments of my life. I mean, really playing in a band, for me, it's such an artistic expression, and I don't call myself an artist by any stretch of the imagination. Right. I'm a self-taught rhythm guitarist who learned playing guitar by watching Malcolm Young play Shoot to Thrill. Like that's the extent of what I do. But my fellow bandmate Bobby Mahoney, who I mentioned, who is still extremely active with Light of Day and all that stuff, he's an incredibly passionate Bruce fan, and we broke into the Asbury scene, and just through being persistent and playing a lot, got to do some really cool things. And we got to be on the Light of Day Canada shows, and playing with Joe Grusheky, Pat Travers, I'm trying to think, John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band was on one of the loops we did. Just getting to interact with those great people, John Eddy, James Maddock, Willie Nile, all these people who are kind of in that scene. And yeah, they're almost a generation older than me per se, but the music is universal. So really getting to play in that mix was really such a special experience that I value so much. And my first face-to-face interaction with Bruce was in the 2014 Light of Day scene, where he would show up to the Paramount Theater in Asbury Park to do the big show at the end for Bob Benjamin and everything. He'd be a surprise, and I was loading with other people. I was helping other people load stuff in, and Springsteen shows up in his green Range Rover, and I'm not exaggerating. I have this in some of my bio. I think I have it in my Instagram bio. Comes about this close, maybe a couple inches from running over my left foot, because I guess he didn't see us as he was turning a corner. And he sees us, he stops, rolls down his window, and just gives this hearty Bruce his little Bruce chuckle. So I could say that I was almost run over by Bruce Springsteen. So that's something that I got
going for you, right? We got
right. I know. And then my buddy Bobby ended up playing solo on that show. And I mean, I'm a pretty big Bruce fan, but Bobby's even more so. And he got to guitar tech for Willie Nile on that. And Bruce was back there with Willie Nile. So he got to have a face-to-face interaction with him. And he gave him a great piece of advice that Bobby shared with me and in life. And I don't know, can you swear on this show or no? If you prefer not, I can do the PG-13 version.
Yeah,
sure.
Your choice. I'm going to beep if it's the F-bomb.
Okay.
I will beep it, or you can do the PG, whatever.
Okay, well, the PG-13 version is, he said, Bobby asked him, what's a good piece of advice you have trying to break into the music industry? And he said, don't F up. And that's his piece of advice. So I've kind of carried that with me too in life. Don't F up. And just go out there.
Like, do you think of that before you're going to do a show? Like, okay, as Bruce says, don't F up.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
let's go.
Right. That's your way of going out there. I think of that when I cover big events, because you got to keep yourself in the moment. But Bobby got to play with Bruce on that stage of 100 people. Bobby was right next to Bruce, and he's got on his bicep tattooed, I got this guitar and I learned how to make it talk. And Bruce is playing Thunder Road stripped down acoustic next to him. And I'm watching my best friend up there on stage with Bruce, and I just start weeping like a baby.
I'm almost crying.
Oh,
just
dude,
hearing the story.
It was
right?
It was surreal. And I mean, I've had a couple other small interactions with him over the years, but that was like such a memory. That was living through my friend, and like
Yes.
I think it speaks to the power of Bruce's aura, right? Like that little moment like that can mean so much.
You know what I find interesting, John, is when I hear stories about this, there is such a small percentage of fandom because there's always those people. But most people are just joyous for that experience, not jealous. Oh, I wish that could happen to me. Or they may say that, oh, how I'd love that to happen. But they truly are happy for you or your friend, not, damn it, why did you get to do that and not me? Versus on other fandoms, I think it would be less generous. And I think that's partly because people who love Bruce tend to be, and I've done 5 years of interviews, just people that love music and love what's good about his music.
Sure. And I mean, I got my interact with him. He almost killed me, so that was cool.
Hey, there you go.
and there were other interactions, like I said, that I'd have later on. Ed Mannion joined us on stage to do a sax solo over a song that we wrote, and like what a great, incredible experience that was. So like, and that was at a sold out show in Toronto at the Elma Combo, and I mean, what an amazing experience that was. So I value my years playing in that scene. I left the band because I needed to pursue my real life passion from the start. I've known since I was 5 years old that I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So that's kind of what I had to do. And I did it. But every now and then it's always fun before, unfortunately, the world shut down with this pandemic. It's always fun to go home and play with them. And we actually got to do a Springsteen tribute show or Thanksgiving time 2017 at the Wonder Bar, and they're like, what 5 songs do you want to play? So I'm like, yeah, we're going into the archives, like we're going deep. We whip out held up without a gun, we whip out Roll the Dice. Like, I'm living life. I'm very happy. So yeah, man, what a great experience playing in the Asbury scene.
Oh, I bet that's a wonderful memories. And yes, I'm thinking of you. And I always worry I'm going to hurt someone's feelings, and I don't mean it that way. But, E Street Radio's Be the Boss, right? One of my best friends, Sam, and I will be in the car, and we're listening to it, and someone of their 5 songs will pick Thunder Road. And we're like, why are you wasting? Why are you wasting that slot? Everyone would pick Thunder Road, right?
I remember Bobby and I went to the Hershey concert. In 2014 on the High Hopes tour, and we were right there, front, middle in the pit. And I'm like, all right, sign request, we're doing this. And like, people will be like, give me Land of Hope and Dreams. I'm like, no, we're doing It's a Shame. I'm like, we're going on. Like, if I want to play Bruce, I want obscure Bruce that's gonna mean something to me. So yes, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, but like, yes, that's all of us think that way about Thunder Road, right? Like, absolutely, that goes without saying. Interesting thing: the first 7 shows I attended, he did not play Thunder Road.
I have never seen Rosalita live.
Wow,
is that insane or what?
I've never
insane. Seen Rosalita live. Like, if I go on to like 2 Bruce shows, it's one thing.
Yeah,
but I think I've been to more than enough to be able to qualify to see Rosalita live.
Yeah, right. So and I think that's my point. If I'm holding a sign, I'm holding "This Is Your Sword," or right. Play Daniel's Den, right? like I may be the only person in the world, but I would love to hear, my favorite sign story is we were in Nashville, I guess 2014.
Oh, is that the show with Burnin' Love and Satisfaction? Oh, that's one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen clips.
It is. It's great. But there was a kid that had a sign, "It's my 19th birthday, play the river." And we're like, okay, have you listened to the song? Like, just because you're 19, this is not a happy birthday song.
No, it's not. No, it's not. That's funny. What a
Yeah,
great show that was, though. Very
oh,
jealous you got to be at that one.
yes. And to tell you how spoiled we can be, I really thought, since it was in Nashville, that someone from the Nashville music community might come in for the encore. Like,
Mhm.
I was spoiled. My very first show was 2002, The Rising in Dallas, and Don Henley was living in
Oh,
Dallas at
wow.
the time, and he showed up for the encore, and they did "I Fought the Law" together.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and so I was like, "Oh wow, that's kind of cool." And then one time in Dallas, Bon Jovi was playing the next night,
There you
and
go.
John joined him, and they did "Glory Days" together.
How fun is that?
Yeah,
That's
so that was
awesome.
a lot of fun. Um, so let's talk about um, what are what are songs or albums that have mean a lot to you? Or before we do that, let's talk about the last two, Western Stars and Letter to You. What are your thoughts on those?
By the way, before I even say it, I just looked up that set list of that show that you're at. This is a hell of a set list. I'm
It
very
was a great show.
Yeah,
Yes, I
I'm very,
know.
man, you got to see Darkness on the Edge of Town, Further On Up the Road. That's good stuff.
It was
Um,
great stuff.
so
Yes.
what do I think of Letter to You and Western Stars? So I think Letter to You is really just for someone at that stage in their career. I think Letter to You is just such an exceptional effort, and like you feel the power of the E Street Band on that more than you have in probably 20 plus years on a record. And
You know, it's almost, and to throw it back to sports for a minute, it's like, how the hell can Brady win another Super Bowl at
right.
this age? And then
Hmm.
you go, how can Bruce and the band? I mean, it's a great album. Not, oh, for its age, it's a great album. It's just a
No,
great album.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
you feel the band, and I love Bruce dearly, but there are
Yeah.
times where I think he tries to do things just for the sake of doing things to see if they work or not, which is fine. Every
Sure.
musician reserves the
Sure.
right to do that. Um, but like at its core, like I just love the E Street Band sound. Like Darkness on the Edge of Town is my favorite Springsteen album, and like Darkness on the Edge of Town, that's the E Street Band sound. Like
Yes.
that
Got
is
it.
E Street Band the way it should be played. And Letter to You feels that. Like when I first heard Letter to You, the little piano descend that Roy does in that, I was like, that's the promise. That's Darkness on the Edge of Town. Like that is it right there. Um, I really like the album a lot. I think If I Was the Priest is one of the greatest songs he's ever written. Um, and
What
now
I
that we know the context of it too, it makes
No,
sense.
but I do, and like I said, if I was the priest, is what Outlaw Pete wanted to be.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I just this Western epic. I agree. I When I got the album, you know, and I'm putting on my headphones at work and I'm playing it, and I would just play songs over and over again. And If I Was the Priest, just the way that was built, and you know, and that break, and where Max does the drums, you know, and in crescendo, you're like, God, that is amazing.
The dynamic movement on that song is incredible, and the Letter to You documentary actually showed how they came up
Yeah.
with that dynamics on that, and I just thought that was great. I think it's a great album. I like it more than Western Stars. Western Stars, my dad is enamored with. He thinks it's just incredible, and like I appreciate what Bruce was trying to do with Western Stars. It doesn't hit as much with me personally. I think there's maybe 5 songs on Western Stars that I really like, and the rest are kind of just there for me. Um, it's funny I mentioned that Hershey show when we went that day. Springsteen posted to Instagram a picture of him recording with a mariachi band. I was like, oh, I wonder when we're ever going to hear that. So then when I'm playing Western Stars for the first time and the Wayfarer comes on, I hear dun 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 dun. I was like, oh my God, there it is. There's the mariachi band. I've waited 5 years for that. But I love the Wayfarer. I love There Goes My Miracle. I love Tucson Train. I think Western Stars, the song itself, is just a beautiful and somewhat heartbreaking song in a way too.
Yeah.
Um, and Sundown's a great song, but overall, I would much prefer Letter to You to Western Stars.
Well, and you know what I've shared is that growing up, my parents, my mom especially, loved Glenn Campbell, and
Mm.
Jenny Webb. And so this was right in my wheelhouse. And I could see how your dad might like, because of the age difference, they do. What I love is and as much as you just talked a little bit about this, John, he did not do Darkness or Born to Run or Born in the USA over and over and over again. He did Nebraska, he did the Seeger sessions, he did, Western Stars. He's continued to push himself as an artist to try
Sure.
different things that I think should be admired, not criticized. I know. In fact, I have this. Theory. I have this idea to do a fake Bruce. I'm a big fan of The Ticket, and they do fake characters all the time. They do the fake Jerry Jones, or the fake Jason Garrett, and I feel like I should do a fake Bruce Springsteen fan that just nothing since Darkness has been any good.
Oh
like
God! And look, there are those fans. There certainly are. And like, I'll admit, I'm like a full like Born in the USA dissenter. Like for me,
Yeah.
Born in the USA just like doesn't do it. And I think that's cool that there are so many different things like that Bruce brings to the table that people will resonate with, or they'll be like, nope, this doesn't do it for me. I mean, my mom's two favorite Springsteen songs are Thunder Road and then Bobby Jean. So it's like, okay, like I can get into it for my mother, like when I'm with her or stuff like that. But generally speaking, there is stuff. But then there's also been stuff, Jesse Lair, like, I'm like, I don't care much for this. Like Tunnel of Love stuff, like it didn't do much for me. And then all of a sudden, as I experienced new things in life, holy crap, did that change. And like one of the most impactful songs that I've ever listened to in my life that had a real tangible effect on my life is Brilliant Disguise. And lyrically, it literally grafted how I made certain life choices. So I think that's one of the most amazing things about Bruce's music. And as we age in life, we experience things differently and we look at things differently, where material that didn't hit with us in the past maybe does later.
When I had a guy say that you had to go through a few heartbreaks before you understand Tunnel to Love.
Yeah.
Or at least experience some life. What, Independence Day was never a song that spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's okay. Then I saw it on the River, the second River tour, and I'm talking about how, two people that loved each other dearly didn't know how to communicate. And I thought of my son at 17 and 18 and my wife, his mom,
Mm-hmm.
They could not. I mean, they just fought all the time. One of my favorite stories is he has just finished his sophomore year in college, and he was doing mediocre at best. That would be kind. And I looked at Linda and I said, we're spending a lot of money to him to go to college. Are we trying to put a square peg in a round hole? Is he college material? And she said, if he came home, I will kill him or he will kill me. College is cheaper than an attorney. Okay. And then the very next semester, it clicked for him.
Yeah.
And he ended up graduating, But so when I heard Independence Day and the idea that Bruce is older than his father was at the time he wrote this, so he wrote it as a young man, now singing it from the, older perspective, I fell in love with the song. So I think you're absolutely right, John, that just sometimes the music meets you when you need it.
And I'll tell you this is going to sound absolutely heinous here, so please don't judge me. But I, for the longest time, not that I disliked it because I didn't dislike it, but I was always just kind of whatever with Born to Run, the song. I was like, it's his big hit. Okay, it's cool. It's like the same thing with AC/DC with me. It's like You Shook Me All Night Long is their big, massive hit. But it's like, okay, that doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Right.
Then I read the autobiography at a time I was going through a really rough breakup. And understanding the context of Born to Run and what he went through with that. And the line, someday, girl, I don't know when we're going to get to that place where we really want to go. It hit in a way that it never did before. And then come Broadway, I'm looking at it, I'm watching him play it stripped down in front of 800 people, and that's it. Like, I melted, and now I think it's the most perfect song ever written. So it's just funny.
Well, what I get a lot of crap about is Jungle Land doesn't speak to me.
Okay.
I recognize the brilliance of it. I recognize just the way it's built and how it musically, but it doesn't speak to me the way other songs do.
Sure.
And so, and the other thing, I've shared this many times, but you see the set list because I'm that kind of guy, right? Like, I don't want to go in surprised. I want to read the set list. So I had saw the set list of Broadway because I didn't think I was ever going to go. Ended up getting to go. But before I went, I'm like, really? Why is he doing Dancing in the Dark? I mean, of all the songs,
amazing acoustically. It's
right?
amazing.
Like you're like, why though? Of all the songs, why would he do that? But then I said I should never question him because he talks about, sometimes you got to do like my mom did, put on your dancing shoes, to fight the, and then going to Land of Hope and Dreams.
The transition, I literally, as you just said that, my hair stood up on my arms.
Right.
Like, oh.
And I will tell you, John, sometimes when I'm in a bad place, I will pull up that two song, together, just to give me a shot of, okay, there is good in this world. It's going to be okay. All this darkness past, right? So absolutely.
See, I've done the same exact thing. So I'm really glad to hear it. I'm thoroughly enjoying this. If you want to go 4 hours, we can go 4 hours. I don't care. So,
that is great. I'm so glad.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
So what I do want to know, what brought you down to Orlando? I mean, here, this New Jersey boy, and is that just because there was a gig there for you?
Yeah, it's all part of the career. When you want to be on air and want to be on television, you kind of have to go where the jobs take you. And I went to college, graduated from Quinnipiac, and then immediately after college, I was working as a producer for MLB Network, Major League Baseball Network, and that was a great gig, and I really thoroughly enjoyed that. But I was behind the scenes, and I knew I wanted to be on air, so I had just kind of had to put the pieces together first, and then I went to Bangor, Maine, and was there for 3 years. You got to go to the small town America, which, I mean, we're talking about a guy here in Bruce too, who he writes about those things, even though he never even experienced it in some degree. And so I got to experience some of those things and see a different perspective of life that I'd never been given before. And that was so valuable to get that.
Oh, I bet.
And then, after that, I was fortunate enough to get this gig here in Orlando. So, much higher media market. And yeah, man, now I tell myself all the time, someday, I don't know when, but I'm going to get to that place. And that's my kind of calling card in life. And my friends probably roll their eyes whenever they hear me say that, but I say it all the time. And yeah, it's been certainly something that I hold close to my heart.
Yeah, that's one of the things that my family and people I work with at whatever job I've had is you truly can find a Bruce connection in almost anything.
In anything.
In fact, I just tweeted this morning. I do another podcast where we do a lot of discussion about comic book television shows, and so we're covering the current WandaVision.
Yeah.
And I tweeted a link to "I'll See You in My Dreams."
There you go.
We will bring this up when we're discussing
at the end of the
Wanda
show.
and the Vision. Yes.
Oh, dude. That's so funny you mentioned that because I watched the finale yesterday, and man, I mean, you're right. That hits hard with that too.
It does. It absolutely does.
Or death is not the end. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned bonding over Bobby Jean, which I love. Right, that you're joyous because you may not care for the song, but your mom does, so you do. Are there other songs that have a special meaning to you or your family that you kind of, since you guys are a Jersey a Bruce family?
Yeah, I mean, I told you personally, for me, "Brilliant Disguise" is a song that hits really, really hard, in both a good and kind of a heartbreaking kind of way. Sure. In terms of my actual family, my mom and I have both always bonded over Land of Hope and Dreams. I think that is his modern day Born to Run. And it's crazy. You can say modern day, but he wrote it 20 plus years ago at this point. but I think that's kind of his modern day Born to Run. And that song, I hate to say it plainly here, but it's hopeful. And like, it gives
It
you
is.
something to actually buy into. And that's always been a special one. I'm trying to think here. I mentioned Thunder Road because that's one that my mom and I hit with. My mom and I are particularly close. I'm close to my dad too, but especially my mom. And I think she kind of listened to Bruce on a more surface level. She loved him and he was one of her favorites, but she'd always joke with me. She'd be like, how do you understand some of the deep meaning of some of this stuff? And then as I've like expanded my fandom and I start to explain some of these songs to her, she starts to hear it. And that's a really cool experience for me as a music fan, where like I was able to turn that on to someone who's like, okay, now I hear that song in a totally different way than I've been hearing it for 30 plus years. So there are a lot of songs that we'll listen to. It's hard to kind of come off the top of my head, but The Rising and Lonesome Day, I think Catfish Dancing on the End of My Line is one of the greatest lines like ever written.
What an image, isn't it?
And that's exactly it. It's imagery, right? So I think about that with my writing, with what I do for a living, and telling these stories of human emotion. And I have the benefit of using images to write, but I always have to match what I write to that image. So when you have a situation like what Springsteen has, where he has to use imagery in his writing to get you to picture that, to get you feel that, man, it's incredible. So I'd say The Rising is probably one of those songs too.
So I'm going to change curve just for a minute. What is on your wish list of events you haven't covered yet?
Events I haven't covered in like the sports world?
In the sports world, yeah.
I would love to cover the World Series. I haven't gotten to do that. That's baseball's my favorite sport. So getting to cover the World Series would be really special to me. I've covered the NFL playoffs. I've covered the NBA playoffs. I've covered the Daytona 500. I think the World Series is probably top bucket list for me, which I know baseball isn't really all that it used to be in a lot of fans' minds, but for me, it's such a deep connection. I connect to baseball like I do Bruce. So,
well, in baseball, as the beautiful Ken Burns documentary talks about, right? Like it's a mother, daughter, father, son, parent, child connection. Like my son and I took him to baseball games for the longest time. You know, opening day when we could get tickets, it was when the Rangers were really bad. I always pulled him out of school on opening day and we went to opening day together. And, you know, because I always made the argument, whatever he learned one day in school, he's going to get more that he spent the day with his dad at a ballpark, you know, knowing that together. And,
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree with that. What has so far in your career been the holy S moment? I can't believe I'm getting to cover this.
Ooh. I will say, I don't know if I've had the moment of I can't believe I'm covering this, because you get desensitized a lot.
Sure.
But the moment where I said, oh my God, I can't believe I'm covering this, as in this is unfolding in front of my eyes, was probably last year's Daytona 500. I don't know if you're a racing fan or not, but Ryan Newman suffered a final lap crash where he went airborne, and it was this fiery crash that the entire sports world saw. And I ended up capturing video of it on my cell phone. I just happened to be shooting final lap on my phone. The video went like 8 million views on social media, and everyone thought he was dead. And I was live across the country like 11 times that night. It was, and I can relate this to Bruce too. Sure. I'll try to here. I'll do it in a very roundabout way here.
That's all right.
But what I had seen in front of me was this heartbreaking, tragic moment. And there are a lot of people that can go on air in a situation like that and be like, well, it was on the final lap of the Daytona 500, Ryan Newman crashed went airborne, blah, blah, blah. But I said to my producers that night, I said, I'm
By
not
the
going.
way, I love you just did your official announcer voice.
Oh, and I don't speak like that on
I
camera.
know you don't, but I just love that.
Like, and I think it's very personal that you need to, like, how I'm speaking to you right now is how I sound on camera.
Exactly.
Like, that is how I talk, because I think that's how you connect to people.
Absolutely.
So rather than me talking like this, and
I do now want a fake John, like, and
Okay.
now on Set Leslie Bruce, your host Jesse Jackson.
Your host Jesse Jackson. Yeah, no, we could do all that too. But
continue. I'm sorry, brother.
No, you're good. I like that diatribe. So I could go out there and script out something like what I'm going to say, but I told the producers, I said, just have the anchor ask me a question. I don't know what they're going to ask me. Just have them ask me a question, and I'm going to react in a human way. And it was the most vulnerable thing I've ever done on camera, because, I was shaken. I thought I had just seen a guy die in front of me.
Yes.
And we lucked out that he ended up being okay. But I was fortunate enough to actually get nominated for an Emmy for that stuff, because I decided that the personal human vulnerability was more valuable than trying to be super composed and all that stuff. And I think that's a lesson that I've taken from Bruce, because I've seen that vulnerability on stage. When he breaks things down in the middle of a song, and he's growing up on Broadway, perfect example of that. And he starts talking about the moment where he knew that he couldn't waste his mother's hard-earned money. It was a very real, like, vulnerable moment of, man, I'm kind of a crappy person for doing this to my mom. That kind of stuff, I take that performance art and I try to incorporate it with how I present myself on television. And that was a moment where I think I did that.
You needed a little human touch.
No doubt.
One of my favorite moments is Houston 2014. Someone put up a sign saying "One Step Up." Mm-hmm. And he, if you Google it, he makes a joke. "We do not know this. You have made your bed, sir." And he starts playing it, and he pulls Patty aside to start singing, and you hear him say, "Band, come in gently," right? Like, and you could see that, they truly have not practiced this song, and it was the High Hopes Wrecking Ball. So it was this huge.
And they were playing all these songs.
Yeah, E Street Band Orchestra. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
He's going to tour again, knock on wood, excluding Letter to You, because we all want to see those songs live.
Sure.
And you've already shared Rosalita. What are other songs you hope to see live that you haven't gotten to see?
And it's funny, because it's not even like Rosalita is like a song I'm like in love with. It's just like, I want to be able to say I've seen Bruce Springsteen play Rosalita, right? Like, I want to be able to do the claps, like I got to be able to do that. So I have some weird obscure songs that I'm just like, yeah, like I'm praying for these things. I told you, It's a Shame. For some reason, I love that song off The Promise. I think that's like the beautiful Stevie Bruce dynamic, and just the groove. I mean, that's up there for me. Roll of the Dice, I think, is people hear Roll of the Dice and they think it's like this big poppy party song, but when you listen to the lyrics of Roll of the Dice, there's like a degree of hope and there's a degree of hopelessness as well that I think is like beautifully striking in a funny way. And I'm so mad because I turned down tickets to go to the second Mohegan Sun show that ended the High Hopes tour, because I couldn't be there. And that show is like the greatest set list ever played. Like, if you want to know what a Jon Alba set list should look like, go to that show, and like that's exactly it.
And you could have been there.
I could have been there. I think I've heard Darkness on the Edge of Town live, but it was at my first Springsteen show, so my memory of it is not super vivid. And I've heard him play it with the Grishecki Band, but I'd really like to hear him play it with the E Street Band. And I'm sad that he doesn't play it too much, because that is my Springsteen album. Man, yeah, I mean, I would love to experience Man's Job with my mom. I think that'd be a really great experience. And yeah, I'd have to think on that a little more. I'd love to hear Lion's Den for some reason. Like Lion's Den, I've always found is a fun song, and Yeah, man. I don't know. There's just so many odd, peculiar ones. I'm like, pull it out. Let's see what you got.
Well, Lion's Den, as I said, I was talking about Daniel and the Lion's Den. I love that song. I don't know why. It's a fun
It's
song.
a very fun song.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Um, I often think, and we're overthinking, but I want to be where the bands are after this pandemic. I would love to do that. Someone on the show, a couple of smart asses, said that he should start every set with tequila when he goes live.
Yeah.
Thoughts on the G-Pad? Did you have feelings one way or another?
I mean, I could listen to Bruce talk like that and fall asleep to that every night,
Yes.
I mean, easily. I think, and I don't want to go too deep into politics here, especially as an impartial journalist, but I think there are some times where Bruce, quite frankly, can be a little naive to the social setting and structure of certain things because he grew up a certain way, and like he is a certain type of liberal versus like the more moderate versus like maybe fully understanding the depth of some of that other stuff that happens on like what we were talking about before, like the Black Lives Matter stuff. And like I think he's kind of the impression of we just need to be united. And there's a lot of people who think that way. And like in theory, that's a great way to live life, but there are so many more layers to that, right? So there's one side of the aisle that was so offended by, oh, how could Bruce dare be calling for this? Like, oh, there's the Hollywood elite. And then there's the other side of it where it's like, does he quite understand the depth of what it would take to actually find that middle ground, given how polarized our country is? So I just kind of watched it and was like, okay, it's a nice message in theory, but there's a lot more depth to this than what is being covered.
Yeah, I think once again, I think one of the biggest problems that as a country we have is most people want to believe the best of themselves and the worst of others. Like
Sure.
I have the best intentions, but you, on the other hand, don't have any at all. I don't remember who tweeted this, but someone said the extreme reactions from both the far right and the far left about Bruce's Jeep commercial tells you how far away from the middle we are.
Mm-hmm.
Like both sides were offended. Like one, how dare this guy call for middle ground when he's been horrible against Donald Trump, and others, oh, how dare we call for middle? Did that mean we're supposed to embrace racist and all this?
Right.
Like, so I thought almost, I will not kid you, John, I thought it might be fake because it looked like it was pulled straight from Western Star's movie.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, did someone kind of just do this together? So I, like you, I love the message, and I understand what he was trying to say.
I just think there's just more depth to it than
Yes.
what was presented.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. What have I not asked you that I should have?
I don't know, man. I just, it's funny because I don't consider myself a spiritual person.
Okay.
I'm not a religious person. So when you don't have those things in your life, you look for something that's going to give you the equivalent fulfillment of religion or of spirituality. And I find that in the music that talks to me. And like I said, there's AC/DC, which is, it's so funny because AC/DC is so like thematically different than Bruce Springsteen. But I have them and I have what Bruce does. And it provides me with so much emotional vulnerability. I get emotional listening to Springsteen music. I mean, Jesus, the Letter to You film, the first 30 seconds, you get that earthreal music, and then all of a sudden it's a slow zoom in on his ranch in Colts Neck, and there I am just bawling like a baby watching it. And I'm just like, I don't experience that with a lot of other things, So I can't stress enough just how much purpose this has given me, especially in a field where I am so enamored with work and what I do, and I kind of have to give 110% of my soul to what I do for a living. So to have that escape and to have someone who can speak to me at that level, it's really special. And I feel like the fact that I got to be up close in that Jersey music scene really added to that specialness for me.
Kind of a special blessing that you've received.
Yeah, it is. And it sucks that when I have kids or 20 years from now, they're not going to get to experience some of these same things that I got to. But I think there are lessons that I've learned through listening to Bruce that are going to sit with me for the rest of my life that I will be sure to impart on others, and values, right?
Yeah.
And understanding. And what I love about Springsteen music, and I'm sure you probably agree with this, there's a degree of empathy in Springsteen music. And empathy is something we lack so much in society right now. We lack the ability to feel not for other people, but feel with other people. And that's what, man, Bruce hits so hard with that stuff, because I feel him feeling with me.
Yes.
Whether he meant it or not, I feel him feeling with me.
Yeah.
And I value that so much.
I think well said. Well said. This has been so much fun. But before I let you go, I got to ask you the Mary question. So, okay. If you are a fan of Jon's work and you're listening to this going, what is the Mary question? I'll give it to you. J. Armstrong is an honors English teacher that just recently retired in the Philadelphia area. And every year, every school year, he would have his senior honors English class break apart Thunder Road as if it was a poem. They talk about the lyrics, they talk about the imagery, they talk about the themes of the poem. They compare it to Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken, and other great American poems. And then at the end of the 2 days, he looks at the class and says, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road? So Jon, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car?
Oh my God. I've never, I'm like going through it right now. Oh my God, putting me on the spot here. How does Mary get in the car? I think she does. And not to like divert from this, but
no, this is your point. Yes, this is your essay question. So.
Yeah, like I think she does. And like you said, they break it down like poetry. I think Springsteen music is poetry.
Amen. Absolutely.
And like, whether it's a haiku or whatever, like there is no other form of music that I listen to that I think the words read like poetry in that sense. There's one other band I will say, and I'm sure you're familiar with them given their connection to Bruce, but the Gaslight Anthem.
Yes.
And the Handwritten album, the song Handwritten particularly. There's a line, did you want to drive without a word in between? I can understand you need a minute to breathe just to sew up the seams after all this defeat. Man, what a line. And that reads as poetry. And I think Bruce does the same for me. So I'd have to really, like, to get back to the question, like I'd have to really like analyze and break it down more. But I think, yeah, I think so. And if Mary doesn't want to get in the car, I'll sure get in the car with Bruce. You know, I don't care. That's cool. Maybe he wants to drive. I'll drive down Route 9 in that Challenger. I don't care, man. Let's do it.
So thank you. That's a great answer. I did want to share, one of my guests said she absolutely gets in the car. They drive west, and he believes Moonlight Motel is the end of their story.
Oh,
that Mary has passed away. They have spent their life together, and he's gone to remember her. Well,
and again, someday, I don't know when, we're going to get to that place. I think that's part of the journey, right? And
absolutely.
What a beautiful analysis that is, the Moonlight Motel. I mean, I don't know if that's something that he consciously thought about, but I think the beauty of this kind of open-ended music is that you draw your own conclusions as to what this is. And what is the promised land? The promised land is something different for everyone, right? The
Yes.
promised land for me is I view the promised land as kind of a myriad of things, but getting to the point that I want to in my career and having a life, a stable life with normality. I've never known normality in my career. I work incredibly strange hours, 6 to 7 days a week sometimes. I've never known what normalcy is. So maybe that's my promised land, but maybe your promised land is something totally different from that. And that's what I love.
So, John, are you enjoying the journey though?
I have made sure to remind myself that I need to enjoy the journey, because there are times where I don't, and I need to remember that I need to.
Because I'm sure you get asked this all the time. Oh, what's your favorite Bruce Springsteen song? And it's kind of hard to do, but I've come up with my pat answer, which is true: "Land of Hope and Dreams," "Better Days."
Oh, I love Better Days.
And then the third song changes depending on what day it is. And that's the answer I usually give to people that ask. But Better Days to me is about enjoying the journey. That too many people spend their lives saying, well, when my career is stable, then I'm going to be happy. When I find the perfect life mate, then I'll be happy. When the kids get out of diapers, then I'm going to enjoy parenting. Versus, no, you got to enjoy all of it, because it is the journey. Life is the journey, and every step of that is something that you don't get to relive. So Better Days is kind of one of my theme songs about that, to enjoy the journey. The joke that people say, hey, could you do a 15-minute TED talk without any notice? Yep. Just give me the lyrics to Better Days. I could talk for 15 minutes.
I actually used the lyrics to Better Days recently on air, talking about some of the social justice stuff going on in sports. And so I think that's funny that you mentioned that. And I think that's a great way to look at it, man. And I try to tell myself to enjoy that a little more every now and then, because there are days where it gets really, really hard.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, you're fine.
I always appreciate the fact that, and every once in a while we'll talk about that. Yes, being an on-air personality or being a talk show host is not like you're roofing houses in the summer, but Correct. It is work.
Yeah.
I mean, there is work involved, and it can be mentally and even sometimes physically straining. And while you may love what you do, that doesn't mean some days it doesn't feel like work and you go, damn, I need an adult beverage, or damn, I need to just get away from everything for a minute.
Yeah. And what I do for a living, putting myself on camera, I mean, it does take a degree of vulnerability where people are going to be judgmental of you. People are going to say things about you. People
Yes.
can be critical of you. People are going to tell you you're no good at what you do. And I mean, I'll be frank and honest with you, and I don't mind talking about this because I speak about it openly on social media, because I think it's important that people know this stuff. But I battle mental health issues, and I've had some serious bouts with depression in the past few years, especially. And Bruce is someone that I've turned to as an outlet that allows me to examine that emotional side of me and maybe look for some clarity in some of the things that I do. And it helps sometimes it doesn't, but I do try to tell myself, bringing this back to the original point, that I have a quote that I use all the time, and it's something Bruce could have written, but he didn't, from Brad Stevens, the head coach of the Boston Celtics. He said it after Game 7 of the 2018 Eastern Conference Finals, after his Celtics lost to the Cavaliers, and they were knocking on the door of the NBA Finals. And he said, the pain is part of the path. And what a quote, right? The pain is part of the path. And I think that's something that's going to sit with me forever. And like I said, Bruce could have written that one. Maybe that's a song. Maybe I'll pitch it to Bruce. I'll shoot a little message over there to the ranch and see, maybe we can get a song out of that.
I like that. That's very cool.
And it relates to what you were talking about too, with your son too, going through what he did in college. There were painful things that happened, but it's part of that path. And guess what? Someday, you don't know when, but you're going to get to that place you really want to go.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. John, if someone wants to reach out to you, hear some of your work, how can they?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Jon Alba, JonAlba. Lose the HHs are for losers. We don't need any of that out here. And on Facebook, Jon Alba, multimedia journalist. Those are probably the two best ways to connect with me. My DMs are always open. On Instagram, JON_ALBA. And whether it's talking sports, life, Springsteen, I'm down. And again, a lot of the things I do outside of just hosting the show, I do human interest storytelling, and there are amazing stories of people doing incredible things or overcoming adversity, and I love sharing that with people.
Oh, good. I'm looking forward to that. By the way, when I saw your name spelled, I thought of I have a real good friend who is an artist and a writer, and he's had very successful online comics, but his name is Tom Zoller, and it's Thom. He spells it Thom, and he always makes the joke, "Oh, you spelled Tom the correct way with the H." And so I thought of you, John. Yes, exactly. I said John is spelling his the right way without the H. So.
That's right. Exactly.
Very nice. My friend, this was a blast. I agree with you. We could go hours. I'm sure we will. If something new comes up, I would love to visit with you anytime. You know, if you think about it, I know nothing about AC/DC. So if in a month or so you want to join me and give me to talk about what you found about it, that would be a great hour of discussion, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what, and I'll end with this because I know we got to wrap up, but I one day was sitting in my dorm room and I had a dream that Bruce Springsteen covered Highway to Hell. And then, no exaggeration, a week later, I wake up to see the Pro Shot video of him playing Highway to Hell down in Australia on the High Hopes tour. That was it. My world's connected, and I could die happy after that.
So I was going to ask you about that, but I was like, no, I wonder, it's like, it's one of those things like I have a feeling that, and I will bet money, if you go to someone on stage at a bar, a band or just someone on a guitar, and you throw $5 in the tip jar and go, "Can you do a Springsteen song?" They will probably do "I'm on Fire." I mean, it seems like that's something very easy for them to learn, and I kind of, okay, yeah.
I just rolled my eyes, so yeah.
Exactly. I was so surprised once when a guy said, "Oh, we'll do Tougher Than the Rest." Oh,
there you go.
Great.
Okay, now we're talking.
And then I was so surprised. We were in New Orleans, and the lady was bringing around the tip jar they had been playing. And I was telling her how much we enjoyed. And my wife said, "Go ahead, ask." And she says, "What?" I said, "Well, I'm a huge Springsteen fan. And every time we go somewhere," she goes, "Oh, Atlantic City is one of my favorite songs. I'll do that for you." I was like, wow, okay. So anyway, I was thinking, you're like, Highway to Hell, sure. But I guess to have your two worlds meet was something special.
It was perfect. And actually, Highway to Hell is a super important song to me because that's a song that I heard it and I said, I got to go pick up a guitar. So
cool.
So having that, everything combined, it was perfect. It could not have been any better.
There was a point a few years ago where Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys was touring and Bruce got on stage with him. And I've told people, if I had been in that audience, forget seeing my son getting married, forget having grandkids. At that point, Brian Wilson and Bruce Springsteen on the same stage, take me away.
What song did they do?
He did Barbara Ann or something. I mean, he was just playing guitar. It was just
I'm like, if Bruce is out there singing God Only Knows, I'm like, man, that's going to send me into euphoria. Holy moly.
There's a very early bootleg of him doing When I Grow Up to Be a Man. Okay. Which is very fun.
Very nice.
So okay, we're going long, but I have to tell you the story. So I apologize to you. No. I apologize. So I had a guy on the phone on the show about a month or so ago, huge Bee Gees fan.
Oh, I love the Bee Gees.
Yes, I did. Yeah. And so David talked about that. He really liked Bruce's doing Staying Alive.
I loved it.
Yeah, he liked it. He says, I think, he says, often when because he says, when I read the story, that that was one of the ways they wanted to do it in that style, but they ended up doing different for the movie. And I said, oh, okay. He said, but I do need to tell you a fun story. He says, I've never seen the Bee Gees live, but I was able to go to Barry Gibb concert once. He says, and he did I'm on Fire that night.
And do you know the story behind that?
No, well,
Bruce did Staying Alive, and I think it was Barry in Boston that week was like, hey, everyone's talking about this cover that Bruce did of us. Why don't I do one for him?
yes.
So he did I'm on Fire, and man, I love the Bee Gees. Their One Night Only live album is one of my most listened to live albums ever, and I think Barry just has the most incredible voice. And yeah,
absolutely. And I love the documentary that HBO just had on them. But
Excellent.
anyway, so my friend David is like, and I gotta admit, Jesse, I was bitter because this is the only chance I've ever had to hear Barry Gibb, and he's doing a cover.
He's doing Bruce.
He said, there are so many songs I want to hear him do. He says, now after the fact, I appreciate it. It was good. But at the time, it was like, I said, yeah, I think of that. If you'd never seen Bruce before, that Nashville show, right, with Burning Love and Satisfaction, like, really? Now, of course, I've seen him multiple times, and I love it. Someone made a joke once that the E Street Band should do a tour of doing nothing but covers. They should just have a whole set, and I'm like, I'd go in a minute.
They're the best bar band in the world.
They are the best bar band in the world. Jon, please be safe. Thank you so much. Let's stay in touch.
Yes.
I'd love to hear your AC/DC story. That sounds amazing. So hang tight while I close things up. Listeners, I hope you have enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for listening as always. Please remember to social distance, wash your hands, wear an effing mask, and let's all be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. For now, thank you and goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts, as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts, as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does, you can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.